Charter schools are put on notice. Arm your teachers, and you're out of the school district. There's no sign the recall against Governor Polis is even going to turn in signatures. That tells us something important and messy about the future of politics. Breaking down what a positive plutonium test means for everyone who is alive and would like to stay that way for as long as possible. And a developer changes plans, but still wants to tear down the chapel a neighborhood loves. That's next. Colorado's last school shooting happened in a charter school in Douglas County in May. Now, the school superintendent in that conservative part of Colorado is warning his charter schools. If they arm their teachers, they can get out of his school district.
Teachers are not armed. We will fight tooth and nail if any school, whether it's a neighborhood school or a charter school, decides to arm its teachers. If it's a charter school, we're going to ask that they leave the Douglas County School District oversight.
We had not heard DougCo Superintendent Dr. Thomas Tucker take that hard line against charter schools and arming teachers, and neither had Laura Carno. She's Colorado's best-known advocate for arming teachers. We talked this afternoon, and she said that she's hoping that school leaders like superintendents will listen to parents. She wants them to offer different types of security options to meet different families' needs. That superintendent's ultimatum came during a discussion of how schools can provide more security at no added expense to taxpayers. Our Marshall Zellinger was listening in.
Maybe you're not ready to say this, but what would you have us do?
A lawmaker known for long speeches summed up this school safety committee hearing in 6 words. What would you have us do? What laws can legislators pass to make students safer?
One of the issues that we see that I don't think will cost a single dollar to fix is today we inherit threats from other school districts and they inherit ours.
John McDonald, the face of public safety in Jefferson County Schools, suggested a law that requires districts to notify each other when a student moves and has had a threat assessment.
School districts will send the student's threat assessment along with their educational records so we know who we're inheriting. Right now there's no standards for that. So if a student engages in attack-related behavior in one school, he can transfer to another school district and they'll never know.
Another idea was for the state to cover the cost of school resource officers.
Right now we pay in our district 50% of the cost of our SROs. I think in some communities there's no support at all. Getting to a place where an SRO is something that's funded consistently throughout the state, I think, would be tremendously helpful to large systems like ours.
A third idea was about setting a standard for how school safety drills are conducted.
What is the janitor doing? What is the resource officer doing?
We're very, very focused on ensuring that we do proper lockdown drills for our kids. We start at preschool. We make no apologies for that.
Typically in the spring, we do an unannounced drill, and we're now at a place, given some emerging research, where we're reevaluating that because of a concern that the trauma of an unannounced drill may outweigh the benefits that we're trying to develop in kids and getting ready to respond if an incident happens.
There is another idea that got floated at the Capitol today, and it came from John Castillo, the father of Kendrick Castillo, who was shot and killed at STEM School Highlands Ranch in May. Kendrick's father wants to change how we talk about what happened to his son.
I would like to see the renaming of the act itself. You know, instead of a school shooting, I believe that it's domestic terrorism. Nobody likes terrorism. I felt the same way when my son's life was taken as when the planes went into the Twin Towers in New York. It's the same gut-wrenching feeling. You know, when we say it's just a church shooting, just a school shooting, it just happened at a Walmart, it's just saying that it's isolated to those areas. No, it's an epidemic.
John Castillo also had an idea for lawmakers to include students in the conversation about potential laws that would impact students. Kyle, no decisions on potential legislation. This is just how they draft legislation ahead of next year's session. So every lawmaker will have a say in this next year, but nothing was decided today about what might move forward perhaps to next year.
The idea of this summer work is to tee up some bills that might have some consensus behind them. But you heard Kendrick Castillo's father. He's talking about a cultural change. He's not talking about a legislative change.
I mean, we talk about no notoriety and not naming suspects or shooters. This would be a completely different look at of mass shooting events in the nation.
All right, Marshall, appreciate that. So ask Marshall to stick around for double duty tonight to update us on the story that we were discussing here yesterday, and that is the potentially concerning plutonium test result that was found out near the old Rocky Flats on the west side of town. And Marshall, we get some more clarity on those results today.
So we wanted to know what was the actual level of plutonium that was found in the ground, and it's 264 picocuries per gram. And a picocurie is a unit that measures radioactive decay. That's about as much science as we're going to get into, but it's 5 times the level that you would want to see near Rocky Flats. They took a sample like this jar of coffee grinds, and they took the sample, tested it, let's say that got 264 picocuries per gram. Then they're like, well, let's test the second sample. That got 1.5. So this is why the state health department is cautious about saying there's not a public health risk.
We have strongly suggested that they do exactly what you're saying. Go take additional samples in that area. We understand that this is an elevated result. We take that seriously, and we want them to collect more data so we can understand what's going on.
Your reaction during what you just heard, Kyle.
I'm shouting out during this, but go ahead.
Does the Jefferson Parkway, the people that want to build that toll road out there, do they have to take a sample beyond what just happened here? They don't have to. They're encouraged to, and we're told they're going to. And they've done 250 other samples up and down the corridor that they didn't have to in the first place. Yeah. They don't have to, and I push, like, at what point would state health say, we're taking over? But this is not their land. This is the Tollway Authority's land. And then you could also get into, is the state health department, is this the Department of Energy because it's federally decided because it was Rocky Flats? All we know now is there's just that one sample that could be an anomaly. There's more testing being done, and the Parkway Authority is voluntarily moving ahead with testing that same area again.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the neighbors there are going to want some voluntary testing, lots of that voluntary testing. That explanation does help, though. Thank you, Marshall. Appreciate it. The conservatives who are trying to recall Democratic Governor Jared Polis have just 15 days left to collect what would be a record number of signatures. But there's nothing to suggest that this recall campaign is actually going to turn in any signatures.
We don't know. I hope we do.
The difference between hope and changing Colorado's governor is more than 600,000 recall signatures. And there is no sign that the poorly financed recall against Democratic Governor Jared Polis is even close. Recall spokeswoman Karen Cataline isn't releasing signature numbers, and she isn't happy that I keep asking.
We're 2.5 weeks away, and we have every intention of getting enough signatures. We just don't know yet.
If the Polis recall falls short, they're not going to turn in the signatures that they gather for verification by the state. And here's why. If a voter signs one recall petition, then they can't sign a future recall petition against that same politician in the same term.
Because I guarantee you, there are people that are enough riled up that they might just do another recall in the future.
So we could end up seeing recall attempt after recall attempt against Governor Polis. Now, this helps conservatives because they can gather lists of contact information along with those signatures for all those disgruntled voters, people to go back to first in the next recall for a new signature. But you also have to think it might hurt if people feel like they are being asked to sign and sign and sign again and again. With no sign, it's actually having an impact. So speaking of signatures, 2,000 of them are now in the hands of Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser. Each signature, someone's request that there be an independent investigation into the police killing of 19-year-old Devon Bailey in Colorado Springs. First, talk about this. This was the armed robbery case. Officers responding that day shot Bailey in the back 3 times. The petition given to the AG makes a frequent objection to these post-shooting investigations like these. They say that the investigators are too close to the agency involved, that they work together all the time, so they should not be investigating each other. The petition wants the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, or the FBI, to handle it. Colorado Springs police pretty quickly released body cam video of that shooting, shortly after some civilian security video that raised real questions about how that shooting went down. Tonight, we get some fresh analysis of the video from a police trainer who testifies in cases like this. He told our Steve Steger he would have done the same thing as those officers.
We're going to just check and make sure that you don't have a weapon, all right?
This video has now gone national. A 19-year-old running away from police, shot in the back repeatedly.
It's one of the most inherently dangerous situations for an officer to be involved with.
I spoke with Ed Obayashi via Skype. As a former cop, he is admittedly pro-cop, but he's also an expert on police use of force. In addition to the fact that Devon Bailey was shot in the back, he wants you to consider 3 distinct elements of this body camera footage. Number 1.
What are your names?
The approach.
The primary officer, the contact officer, initially is exercising a more of what today is fashionably called a de-escalated approach.
Responding to an armed robbery call and seeing 2 men who fit the description of the suspects, the officers could have responded weapons drawn. They chose not to. Number 2.
So we got a contact that keep your hands out of your pockets.
Police told Bailey to keep his hands away from his pockets. Bailey responds by keeping his eyes on the officers approaching from behind. When one gets too close, he runs. At this point, he looks again.
No doubt the DA, the investigators are analyzing this video frame by frame and slow motion, etc. But you see clearly that Mr. Bailey looks over his right shoulder.
And 3, this motion. His right hand moves toward his waistband. It's at this moment the officers begin shooting.
The courts have recognized there was no time for an officer to think in these situations. They have to rely on what they are perceiving.
Last week, the El Paso County Sheriff handed off the investigation to the El Paso County DA. The DA said the investigation could take 3 to 4 months before reaching a decision as to whether or not the shooting was justified, Kyle.
And when we look at what could have been different in that incident, everybody, of course, is going to fixate on the last moment of the video, the shooting. But your expert told you that the way the officers approached the scene could have been escalated from the approach that they took.
I thought that was fascinating perspective. If you watch the video, you see the officer approach them just kind of gently, no weapon drawn. Ed Obayashi says they technically could have come in weapons drawn because this is a call that was an armed robbery call where they suspected someone had a gun. It was in their training and all in their right to approach with weapons drawn. And it raises the question if that would have changed the outcome of this.
Yeah, and clearly nobody was satisfied with that. All right. Thank you, Steve.
Will a developer's change in plans convince a neighborhood that it's ready to let go of an old chapel? An incident involving a police officer on the 16th Street Mall. An awesome incident.
I wish that happens a little bit more often, so I get a chance to dance a little bit more.
How about some joy? Next.
For the second day in a row, near 100 degrees. We just missed a record by 1. 98 in Denver today. The average is 87. And now we're tracking some severe thunderstorms to the north, the leading edge of a cool front that will bring relief from the heat tomorrow. But with that cooler weather comes moisture and more of this. Severe thunderstorm warning this hour outside of Keensburg for a storm tracking south that has large hail and damaging wind. High pressure starting to shift. That means more moisture available for storms tomorrow and temperatures dropping into the 80s for the next 2 days. Tonight, the focus for strong storms will be along the I-76 corridor. These storms will be severe and go late into the night. Denver, an isolated thunderstorm possible tonight. Scattered storms likely tomorrow. Partly cloudy, 61 tonight. Tomorrow's high in the mid-80s with afternoon storms that'll linger into the evening. A few storms with temperatures comfortable on Thursday. And then we turn up the heat for the weekend, 90 to 95 degrees for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And just enough cloud cover. The sunrise and sunset pictures lately, Kyle, have been amazing.
Does not stink right there. Thank you, Kathy. The developers who want to tear down the Berkeley Park Chapel are offering neighbors a compromise that still involves tearing down the Berkeley Park Chapel at 46 and Tennyson. That came out today as Denmark's Landmark Preservation Commission advanced a protection against demolition to City Council.
We vigorously oppose the nomination of our building.
Our main goal is to save the chapel.
My name is Carl Coble. I work for Coble & Company. We're a developer, a longtime developer in the city of Denver. We're under contract to purchase the property at 46 and Tennyson, and we'd like to see that property redeveloped.
I'm Bill Killam. I'm just a member of Historic Berkeley Regis. It's our contention that it's a historic building, and it should be saved for the benefit of the neighbors and the neighborhood.
Unfortunately, a designation on this property would have a significant decrease of the value of the property.
So it's an important piece of the fabric of the neighborhood as well as being architecturally and historically significant.
I recognize why some people have familiarity with the building. There is, for them, a memory with the building. but the building itself is very difficult to reuse.
We have been in discussions with the developer.
We had a community meeting in early July, and we took city input, or the community input, on what they wanted to see there.
Last week we saw the revised development proposal, conceptual plans from COBOL.
And so we went back and worked with our architect to redesign our plans and our proposal.
The problem is that redevelopment plan still includes total destruction of the chapel.
Hopefully we can get a result at council that allows us to build something that the community wants to see, that can be a place for the next 60 years for people to congregate for longer than just 2 hours at a time.
We think that there can be a balance between saving the old and developing the new.
So we've seen how these landmark designations are always up for negotiation. There's that recent deal that lifted a potential landmark designation for Tom's Diner on Colfax, so that property could potentially be redeveloped. As for the chapel property, city council members are going to talk about this next month.
Colorado's tiny menace has escaped its quarantine zone. But the folks in charge say, nothing to see here. Some power moves on display on the 16th Street Mall.
We had a little exchange and it was awesome.
Who do you think won? The officer or the 7-year-old? That's next.
I wouldn't last a day as a police officer. Probably wouldn't last an hour if I was assigned to the 16th Street Mall. They see some stuff. But then again, I don't have this officer's attitude. Officer Tanarat Puvapaisangat met a boy who asked to take photos with his DPD motorcycle. The officer, who goes by PJ, says he didn't know what 7-year-old Jaden Marquez was going to do when he first walked up to his Harley, but Jaden busted a move. So then Officer PJ decided to show him what he could do, and a dance-off was born.
I thought he would start dancing. I thought he would dance like that, but he could break dance. And then he's like, try this, try that. And then I was like, whoa, he can break dance.
That little moment was big for me, because sometimes you go into work, you don't always, get all the the nice reactions from the public. People don't always, say nice things to you. But one little moment like that really makes my day.
Do you wonder if he just walks around all day waiting to see if people break dance so he can show off what he's got? He was happy to do it when we went to go interview him today as well. Sent some mics that we clipped to him flying and everything else. But
everything's flying.
And officer skills. There goes the microphone. The tiny beetle that's been destroying ash trees in Colorado has been found outside of what's supposed to be its quarantine zone. The emerald ash borers moved into Broomfield. This was pretty much to be expected. A guy found an emerald ash borer on a sidewalk at 136th and Main. It was not eating a tree, it was on a sidewalk. We know that the beetle is already in Lafayette and Louisville, Superior, and Boulder, where it was first spotted in 2013. So those areas are within the quarantine zone that was created to prevent humans from spreading the bug to new areas. The ash trees in Broomfield have already been treated with insecticide that's designed to prevent against the beetle. Quarantine boundaries are not going to change, and that's because that beetle wasn't found eating a tree and they couldn't find any trees in the area that seemed damaged. We return next with your feedback. We're listening to your feedback, differing views on the DougCo school superintendent telling charter schools that arm teachers that they should leave his district. John writes in to say it's not his district. Who does he think he is? Whereas Connie says, considering the fact that the STEM Highlands Ranch School's private security guard shot at police officers and wounded a student in the chaos, I think the superintendent has the right idea. Shirley says, tie and no beard. Date later? No Shirley. Job interview before work. See you next time.